In the shadowed heart of a forgotten medieval kingdom, where the mist clung to the earth like a shroud of sorrow, there stood a castle older than memory. Its towering spires clawed at the heavens, as if begging the indifferent gods to listen. His skin turned to waxen gray, his breath thick and labored, and his once commanding voice reduced to a whisper, lost in the wind. The land itself seemed to mourn with him. Harvests withered, rivers ran low, and wolves crept ever closer to the village thresholds. Superstition flourished where reason faltered. The people spoke in hushed tones of curses, of ancient sins rising from the soil to claim the last of the king's bloodline. The courtiers recoiled as she passed, her scent of damp earth and something far fouler lingering long after she had gone. She spoke but 3 words to the queen. Within those cold stone walls lived a king, a man once known for his laughter that could thaw the harshest winter night, and eyes as bright as the midsummer sun. But time, as it always does, grew greedy. And one bleak autumn, the king's light began to dim. His mother, a woman named Isolde, was of humble stock, a servant in the queen's own household. She loved her child as fiercely as any mother before her. Having named him Elias, after the father who never returned from the Eastern Wars, her hair hung in clotted strands of white, her eyes twin orbs of milky fog. The queen's men came at dawn, their eyes hidden beneath steel helms, their orders unspoken. She was told to carry her child to the roots of the black tree at the edge of the old wood, a place long whispered to drink the souls of the unwilling. None dared speak her true name, for to do so was to invite death into one's home. But desperation breeds madness, and madness paved the way for her arrival. His tiny face was peaceful, unknowing of the fate crafted for him by old gods and desperate men. She crossed the frost-stiffened fields, the distant wail of wolves her only escort. The soil smelled of damp decay, of centuries of grief. Her hands, calloused and cracked, trembled as she laid Elias upon the earth. The child stirred, a soft whimper escaping his lips. Above, the stars blinked coldly, indifferent witnesses to the unraveling of a soul. No physician could name the sickness that clutched at his soul. The child made no sound, his face serene, as if cradled by angels unseen. And Isolde, with each motion, felt her soul splinter. 1,000 unspoken words caught in her throat. Memories of a first cry, a first smile, futures now stolen by the greed of a crown. She could not weep, for what mercy is there in tears when the world demands blood? Should she refuse, both would perish, and the sickness would bleed into the land until none remained. Then came the old woman. She placed a withered hand upon the fresh soil, and spoke words older than any tongue remembered. The wind howled, the tree groaned, and far away in the high tower, the king's breath grew steady once more. Beneath it yawned the hollow, a pit long abandoned, known only in ancient songs as the Morning Mouth. There the earth drank deepest. She had lived her life bent beneath the weight of lords and kings, her name barely a breath upon the lips of others. And now the world demanded of her the ultimate betrayal. She was known only as the Seer of Black Hollow, a creature so ancient her birth was said to predate the stones of the castle itself. The other mothers clutched their children tighter, the old priests locked their doors, and the shadows lengthened, thick with watching eyes. Under cover of moonless night, she was summoned to the royal chamber. A life for life. No elaborate ritual, no cryptic riddle, just a grim exchange. The vitality of the innocent for the waning spark of a dying king. Yet it was not her hands the seer demanded blood from. No, it would be the people's sacrifice. A child, newly born, unspoiled by sin or memory, would be given to the earth. And in return, the king would breathe anew. The queen, a woman of proud lineage and colder heart, saw only the survival of the crown. There was only one child born within those cursed walls in the weeks of the king's decline. A boy no older than 10 nights, his cries soft as falling rain, his skin pale as untouched snow. It was Isolde's heart that now hung upon the edge of an impossible chasm, but the seer had one more cruelty to offer. It must be the mother's hand that seals the earth. Only by the mother's own hand, through earth's cold embrace, would the sacrifice be accepted. Isolde's mind was torn between the blood that beat within her veins and the will of the throne. The castle walls whispered of it as the sun fled the sky. When the hour came, Isolde took her child in trembling arms. The black tree rose before her, gnarled and colossal, its branches like the grasping fingers of the dead. Soletta knelt at its edge, her breath missed in the brittle night. In that moment, the world seemed to pause, the wind stilled. The stars seemed to lean closer. And in the hollow of her chest, Isolda's heart waged a war with no victor. Slowly she took the spade. The cold iron bit into the earth, one handful, then another. The soil was heavy, clinging as though reluctant to perform its cruel duty. The first clod struck his chest. Still, he did not wake. Another upon his face. And then darkness. Isolda's fingers bled against the stones. The cold seeped into her bones. But the earth accepted the offering. When it was done, the seer stepped from the shadows, her toothless grin a wound upon her face. The land would be saved. But Isolda, standing before the grave of her blood, knew she had damned herself beyond even the gods' forgiveness. The night swallowed her whole. In the days that followed, the sickness that had gnawed at the king's flesh and soul seemed to wither like a dying weed. His color returned, though paler than before, and his voice regained strength, if not warmth. The courtiers praised the gods. The queen smiled with a mouth that did not touch her eyes. And the people, desperate for any omen of hope, lit candles at crumbling altars. But in the stone-cold marrow of the castle, nothing had truly healed. The air itself hung heavier, the walls weeping with unseen moisture. The servants moved like shadows, their eyes averted, their mouths tight with secrets. The ancient tapestries, once vibrant with woven battles and mythic beasts, now sagged like the skin of the dying. The cry was unmistakable, her child's. She knew the note, the tremble in it, the way it reached higher at the end as though grasping for a mother's arms. And somewhere in those endless corridors of stone and echo, Isolda endured. She was no longer spoken to, nor spoken of. The first time she saw them, she wept, not in grief, but in terror. For in that moment, she knew. What she buried had not remained buried. The other maids avoided her, as though her very breath carried plague. The old woman's face split into something like a smile, not of kindness, but of cold inevitability. When she entered a room, conversation bled into silence. A ritual, a prayer, a mercy. But the seer only turned away. She walked the castle halls, though her feet left no mark upon the dust-strewn floor. The torches burned blue, and the walls wept blood. From every corner, the voices of children long dead whispered in a language she did not know, but felt in her marrow. These were ancient, hollow pits filled with the cold fire of old places, the gaze of something that had touched death and returned. She reached out, but the child recoiled, his flesh crumbling to soil where her fingers brushed. Yet every night it returned, and each time it was louder. When she reached for water at the well, old women made the sign against evil. 1,000 pale hands reached from the ground. The children of centuries past, buried beneath blood-soaked soil, forgotten by time but not by the land. They dragged Elias down among them, his face never leaving hers, until the earth swallowed them whole. A sound like 100 lost souls mourning the injustice of breath stolen and futures denied. A trail of soil leading from the doorway to the castle gates. But one thing all agreed upon. Beyond them, only mist and the broken path to the black tree. Food turned to ash in her mouth. She spoke to no one, for who would listen to a mother who buried her own child? None who knew the story dared bury their dead within the castle grounds again. For in the soil of that cursed place, the earth remembers. In her waking hours, the castle itself seemed to turn against her, doors creaking open to empty rooms. The flicker of movement in mirrors, a faint scent of damp earth wherever she went. At its roots, a figure crouched, small, pale, soil clung to its skin, its hair matted with earth and rot. And when it turned its face to her, it was Elias. It came not from the nursery, nor the courtyard, but from beneath the earth itself, from the roots of the black tree where the soil drank deep, a sound that curled around her bones and clawed at her heart. Yet none dared drive her out, for though they feared her, they feared the curses return far more. The words struck her not in the ears, but behind the heart. And every night, when the world drowned in ink-black dark, she would hear it. The cry, soft, thin, like a reed flute, played by trembling hands. The first time it came, she bolted upright in her chamber of rough stone and straw, sweat slicking her skin, though the night was ice cold. But there was nothing to hold. Isolde told herself it was the wind through broken windows, the groan of the old timbers, the keening of wolves. By the seventh night, sleep was a stranger. Her eyes rimmed with red, skin stretched thin and waxen. And then the footprints appeared, tiny, bare, and wet with dark soil, tracing from the threshold of her chamber to the far wall, vanishing as though swallowed by stone. She sought the seer, desperate, broken, her voice no more than a ragged whisper. "Blood calls to blood, girl." The seer's words rasped like dry leaves. "You sealed the earth, but not the soul." Isolde begged for a way to undo what had been done. "The king lives. That was your price." But some debts, Isolde would soon learn, are never truly paid. That night, Isolde dreamed. Or perhaps it was no dream at all. And before her stood the black tree, its branches twisting like the limbs of the damned. But the eyes. They were not the eyes she had known. "Why, mother?" the voice asked. Though the lips did not move, Isolde fell to her knees, choking on a grief too large for breath. "I was so cold." And then the earth beneath them heaved. Isolde awoke to the sound of weeping. Not her own. It came from within the chamber walls, from the very stones themselves. When dawn came, the servants found her room empty, at the bed unslept. Some say she vanished into the forest, mad with grief. Others claim the earth opened to claim her as it did her child. The cries ceased that night. And though the king's line endured for a time, it always remembers. Decades passed. The king, who once clung to life through stolen breath, died not long after his 50th winter, his body withering like a frostbitten vine. Though his death came by no blade nor poison, those who prepared his corpse whispered of strange marks upon his chest. Long, thin, like the grasp of tiny fingers pressed deep into waxen flesh. His coronation was marred by a bitter storm that cracked ancient trees and sent wolves howling through the valley. Her old seer of Black Hollow had vanished years before. Some claimed the earth took her. Others that she walked into the woods one night, leaving only a trail of ash and teeth. His son, the new king, ascended the throne beneath a sky the color of ash. But though faces changed and names faded, the land itself did not forget. The castle remained, hunched against the hills like a dying beast. And beneath its stone foundations, the restless soil festered. Every few years a child would vanish, first in the fields, then within the walls, always without trace, leaving only the faintest imprint of a small footprint upon earth to dry for such a mark. No one spoke of it aloud. The well water turned brackish, tasting of copper and decay. And in the village, no child born that spring lived beyond their third night, till the year of the hollow births. It began with a stillness in the air, as though the world itself had paused mid-breath. Animals refused to graze near the old black tree, and how such acts do not fade with memory but seed themselves within the bones of the earth. The soil, a Laren red, hungers for balance. If denied, it will take what is owed. Their bodies were cold, their eyes wide, as though something had stolen the warmth from within before their first cry could truly echo. None could explain the blight. Though they prayed burned offerings and bled lambs upon the altar stones, the earth remained unsatisfied. Its ink was faded, its words penned in a tongue long swallowed by time. But the meaning, Alarin claimed, was unmistakable. The earth freshly turned bore the marks of countless tiny hands. Oh, the midwives whispered of a curse reborn, an old debt unpaid. Wolves returned in packs, bold enough to stalk the castle walls. And within the royal chambers, the newborn prince fell silent in his cradle, his skin cold, his breath a final ghost upon the air. The royal line, now thin, blooded and pale, sent for scholars, priests, and foreign magi. The land was to be left to rot. None were to return. Then one night, a scribe named Aileron, known for his thirst for forbidden lore, found in the deepest vault of the royal library a single, brittle scroll. The morning mouth awakens, remembered. Travelers claimed to see pale figures at the windows, to hear the thin wail of children upon the wind. The villagers named it Graven Hollow, the place where earth eats its own. The scroll spoke of a bargain struck in blood, of life stolen to feed a failing king. The new king, a superstitious man with trembling hands, ordered the black tree to be felled, its roots burned, its pit salted. A girl who followed the scent of damp earth and never returned. And if you listen closely, beneath the sigh of the wind and the rustle of dead leaves, you'll hear the voice of a mother still searching, still calling for a name that has long since turned to dust. But men who went to cut it down did not return. In the morning, their tools lay scattered in the frost-hardened ground. Panic gripped the kingdom. Villagers fled to distant lands. Priests abandoned their posts. The king, in a last act of terror and guilt, decreed the castle abandoned. Torches doused, gates sealed. But you cannot seal away the memory of blood. For years, the castle stood as a crumbling relic, its stones swallowed by ivy and mist. In every generation, one would vanish. A child lost to the woods, a babe silent in its crib, because beneath that cursed land, the roots of the old black tree remained. And the morning mouth, though sealed by stone and time, still hungered, still called to its blood. Some say if you walk near those ruins on a moonless night, you'll feel it, a hand, small and cold as grave soil, clutching at your ankle. Elias. Yes. And somewhere deep beneath the earth a cry answers. Generations rose and fell like the shifting tides, and with them, the memory of Graven Hollow began to fade from the tongues of men. What once was a whispered warning passed by, trembling lips around hearth-fires became a name buried beneath layers of forgetfulness. But no curse truly dies. It only waits. A scholar by the name of Corvain Voss sought to carve his name into the bones of history. In the waning years of a distant king's rule, when famine gnawed at the borders of the realm and war battered the countryside born to dust and book rot, he lived for the promise of ancient knowledge, the kind spoken of in forbidden texts and half-burned scrolls. Rumors of the castle where earth remembers blood reached his ears through a drunkard's tale in a frostbitten tavern. Where others dismissed it as old wives' poison, Corvain heard an invitation. Corvain was not a man of faith, nor of fear. He found it marked upon no map. The roads leading to its resting place choked by thorn and ash. Dust hung thick, undisturbed for centuries. As he moved, his lamp cast unsteady shapes against the cracked walls. In every corner, he imagined faces. The few villagers who remained in the outskirts would not speak to him, save for an old woman whose face seemed carved from wax, who grasped his hand and whispered, "Turn back, seeker. The roots are not dead." But Corvain, driven by a hunger older than wisdom, pressed on. If it existed, it could grant him power, knowledge, or something far darker. He reached Graven Hollow on the third night of a dying moon. The land met him with a silence so complete it pressed against his skull like a vice. His lamp guttered in the cold draught seeping from unseen places, the groaning of old stone, the madness of isolation. There, in the gloom beyond his flickering light, a shape moved, and upon the floor and a trail leading from the broken stairwell were small, damp footprints. The castle loomed ahead, a carcass of crumbled stone and sagging towers, its bones devoured by ivy the color of bruised flesh. No bird dared perch upon its ruined spires. No animal crossed its threshold. Through a narrow passageway choked with roots thick as a man's arm, there, in the deepest hollow of the earth, he found it. Corvain stepped inside. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth and something older, fouler, a musk of rot, not entirely human. He made his camp in the old great hall, now a hollowed chamber of stone teeth and tangled roots. Strange symbols still clung to the walls, their meaning lost to time, though some bore resemblance to the sigils he'd seen in ancient funerary rites. The air stank of old graves and saltless tears, and though the earth lay still, it seemed to pulse, a breathless waiting, ancient and ravenous. But it was beneath the floor in the forgotten crypts that Corvain sought his prize. Skulls small and smooth, faces forever frozen in a silent scream. For the old tales spoke of the morning mouth, a pit where ancient blood bought unnatural life, where the earth consumed innocence and gave back terrible gifts. On the second night, the earth shifted. Corvain was awoken by a sound like a child's sigh, soft and wet, bare, soil-caked, too small for any man. They grasped his arms, his throat, his chest, not with force, but with the softness of the forgotten, the desperate clutch of the unclaimed. He told himself it was moisture pooling from the ceiling, not swiftly, not aggressively. It lingered at the edge of sight, a pale glimmer where no light touched. He followed it. That on cold nights, the earth beneath their cottages stirs, that pale hands clutch at ankles in the dark. Through the bowels of the ruined keep, past doors warped with age. The morning mouth, a pit of collapsed stone and churned soil, gaping wide like a black wound in the belly of the world. In the gloom, half-buried bones jutted from the walls. Corvain, heart-pounding, knelt beside the edge. His hand brushed the soil. It was warm. A voice, thin as spider silk, uncoiled from the pit. "Why, mother?" And then another. "I was so cold." Countless voices layered atop one another. The murmuring of children long dead, rising from the earth's throat. Corvin's mind cracked. His body froze. From the soil, small hands emerged. Pale, bone-thin, soil-caked. He screamed. But the walls drank the sound. When dawn came, there was no sign of the scholar, only his lamp, still guttering beside the pit. And upon the soil, fresh footprints. Small, bare, leading away from the castle into the mist. The villagers at the forest's edge claim that in the years since, their dead no longer remain in their graves. The curse, once chained to stone, now walks the land. For Graven Hollow has been disturbed, and the earth remembers. It always remembers.